So remember last week when I said that I'd probably finish Neon White? Well, turns out I'm completely full of shit. Some work things got in the way, some life things got in the way. And unfortunately I went another week without a completion under my belt. I did however get some SMT leveling done, and I did at least make some progress in Neon White. So hopefully this week will be the week that I knock at least that off the list. The one thing I did want to talk about though is Persona 3. So on the 26th and the 27th of November 2022, I did a 24-hour weekend marathon on my stream, link in the description, of Persona 3 Portable. I'm currently doing a segment on my channel with the goal of playing every Shin Megami Tensei game that exists, so if that interests you, come check it out. I'm gonna sound fairly negative about the game in the next section, so before I get into that, I want to make it expressly clear that I like Persona 3. It has a lot of flaws, and when lined up to Persona 4 and 5, it doesn't really stack up, but it's still a deeply enjoyable Megami Tensei game at the end of the day. Plus, I have to give it some credit for being the first Persona game I played all the way back in 2006. Not the first Megami Tensei game, mind you. That belongs to Nocturne. I was still new to Megaten when it came out, so it holds a special place in my heart. Also, this game isn't really part of my backlog since I've beat it before, both the original release and Fez, but since this week was kind of dry, you know, you can come since like it. With that said though, the game is a fair bit more ass than I remember it being. The biggest problem with the game is probably Tartarus. It's this huge tower that you spend most of your time in. The concept of climbing a big tower is fine and all, but the floors are randomly generated, which means that once the novelty is worn off, and it wears off by like floor 7, it just becomes a long drawn-out slog of fighting the same enemies over and over again in the same drab environments. And also, usually the soundtrack in these games are pretty well regarded, and for good reason, but the music that plays in Tartarus really starts to grate when you're exploring these boring environments for hours at a time. And what makes the problem even worse is that as you get further up the tower, some of the enemies start having these instant death spells known as Hammer and Mudo, and you can be casually exploring and getting experience and items and all that good shit when then, BAM! Some enemy hits your main character with one of those spells and you just go down. Game over. In most RPGs it's just a mild annoyance since you can revive, but in Persona 3, and it's bullshit in the other games too, you aren't allowed. Go back to title screen. Doesn't matter that you have, let's say, Yukari in your party just standing right there with a Recalm revival spell, or Akihiko with pockets literally overflowing with revival beads. Nah, you just dead. Your friends see you eat shit, and instead of helping you, they just go, well, fuck this guy, and leave you to rot in Tartarus. For a game series that became about building friendships to make your demons stronger, the main characters in these games have the worst friends I've ever seen. The idea of the main character dying equaling instant game over also happens in the other games in the series, like in Mainline, but in Mainline it kind of makes sense logically because you're like the summoner or the guy with the comp, so when you die you kind of lose control of your demons and they just fuck off. But in Persona you just get fucking abandoned. Outside of combat in Tartarus though, there's still a number of things that get on my tits. Like, the social links are a lot more dull and uninteresting than I remember them being. In the original release you could even reverse a social link, which seems to be removed from this version, but it still makes maxing social links kind of dull. Like, the stories are just not that interesting. Also, I hate the demon fusion in this game. Not being able to pick which skills get transferred over is really annoying. I'm aware this is the old way of doing it, like in PS2 Nocturne, but I've been spoiled by the later games, and going back to these older ones in the series where that wasn't a thing is just really irritating. I mean, you can kind of pick by cancelling the fusion and retrying, and you just keep doing that until the skill you want appears, but it's still time-consuming and annoying. To give Portable 3 some credit though, it's got a lot of improvements over the original game and even Fez that make it easier to manage, so if you were wanting to play it, this version, which is coming to PC soon, is probably the best version to do it with. There's also an additional girl side story, which I've not tried yet, but that's a cool addition. And hopefully, the PC version will maybe do something about the skill inheritance thing. Fingers crossed. But despite my griping, it's still a really good game. Like, it might even be nice to one day do a full breakdown review of Persona 3 and compare its different releases, but yeah, that's another video for another day. Anyway, that's enough harping on about Persona, because before I sign off, I would like to announce the creation of a spreadsheet I made. I have thrown together a list of 100 games on Google Sheets that I plan to work my way through, starting from New Year's. The link to the spreadsheet is in the description, so if you wanted to see what my progress is like, you can do it there. You could even use that spreadsheet to play along at home. I'm not going to work through them in order. I'll probably jump around a fair bit depending on what I'm in the mood for, but I'll be sure to keep it updated so you can follow if you're interested. And one other thing to keep in mind is that not every game on that list is technically part of my backlog. For example, I've put Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2 on there, and I have beat those games a long time ago, like when they were new on Dreamcast. But, you know, I kind of got an urge to play them again, so I put them on there, and I remember so little about them outside of finding sailors that it's almost going to be like playing it for the first time again. Anyway, that's it for this week. Hopefully I'll get a bit more done by next week, and I will see you then. Peace!